In the beginning of Ted's adventure of disgusting behavior, there was a certain pattern to it where he would pretend to need help, and he would charm a lot of these women. But later on, he became increasingly violent. I think it began with the Durange kidnapping in Utah. Carol Durange was at the largest shopping mall in Salt Lake City, and this person came up claiming to be a police officer, identifying himself as Officer Rosebud, and said, "Somebody's tampering with your car, come with me." She ends up getting into a Volkswagen Bug that's all beat up, and then he tries to handcuff her and hit her with a crowbar. So Carol flew out of the Volkswagen into the lap of the people who were driving the car next to Ted. She miraculously escaped. About a year after her attempted kidnapping, this police officer just happened to drive down this cul-de-sac in Utah and saw this Volkswagen Bug at 3 o'clock in the morning idling in front of a house. And he knew that the adults in that house were gone and had left the children there, which were younger women. And so he chased the Bug until Ted pulled over. And then he got out, and it's classic Ted, and said, "Well, I'm just kind of lost. It's 3 o'clock in the morning." They eventually search the car and find ice picks, pantyhose with eye holes cut in them, handcuffs, a bunch of different license plates for different states. You know, a lot of things that are very difficult to explain. And that's how they caught Ted.
In October of '75, Ted Bundy was identified in a police lineup after being arrested on kidnapping charges in Salt Lake City.
Once he was arrested in Utah, the newspapers in Washington State and all across the country went crazy. It was a frenzy everywhere. Then he was released on bail in Utah, which I thought was a very low bail. I think it was $150,000, of which they only have to put up 10%. But I think the reason for that was they wanted to get more evidence against him in Washington. The moment he was released on bail, Ted went back to Seattle, and the Washington authorities followed him around to hopefully build a case.
We were worried when he was in Seattle that he would do it again.
This guy is totally consumed with murder 24 hours a day.
That is when the TED Task Force went into full operation with 5 or 6 detectives, steadfastly following him around, even to the point of letting him know that we were there.
He wasn't officially charged with anything in Washington State. He was being heavily investigated, and that's why he had a right to counsel. Because in Washington and most other places, you have a right to counsel even before you're charged. Ted had talked to other lawyers and law students and came up with my name.
I was a brand new lawyer in King County Superior Court in Seattle, and I thought John Henry Browne was the best lawyer I had ever seen. He had the voice, he had the stature, he had the theater, he had every aspect you need to be the consummate trial lawyer and defender, you know, of the damned, which he is. Ted knew who John was, and that's the lawyer he wanted. He picked the best.
I first met Ted in the lobby of the public defender's office. Ted came in the back door from the alley. He was, you know, jovial and trying to be charismatic. He didn't appear to be scared. I didn't know it at the time, but evil just entered my life. Ted actually enjoyed the attention he was getting from the media and the police. They were following him everywhere, and that became almost comical, because Ted would make fun of them. He'd make cookies for the cops. He'd knock on their windows. He would, like, make coffee and take it to the surveillance vehicles. Ted would take on masks and false mustaches and wigs and everything to fool them.
He was playing games with us, trying to escape from us by running through the University of Washington libraries.
He went researching at the University of Washington Law Library and completely freaked out the whole law school. And I got a letter from the dean of the law school saying, "I think it'd be better if Mr. Bundy used the King County Law Library and not come to the law school. As you know, we have many women students here." And I certainly don't blame the dean or the women students for being upset about it. But, you know, you would think the dean of a law school would at least believe in the presumption of innocence, but that's how bad it was back then. Back in those days, my phone number is actually listed, my home phone. I had some people at my house, and I think there was a gathering of 3 or 4 people from the neighborhood, and the phone rang, and one of the women in the neighborhood answered the phone, And it was, "Hi, this is Ted Bundy, is John there?" And that person left my house and never came back. The media followed him right up to the door of my office, and he would laugh and wave at them, and he enjoyed the attention.
Diabolical genius, deceptive, manipulative. Words authorities use to describe Theodore Bundy.
We still don't believe it. It just can't be. I keep shaking my head. He did all the things that most boys like to do.
He used to go to the pet store and buy 10 little mice, and he would take them into the woods and he'd build this little corral, and then he would choose which one he was going to kill. And then he would exercise his form of compassion, let the others go. Ted's history in childhood was kind of an enigma, and there's all kinds of speculation. He was born out of wedlock, which I think was something that really bothered him a lot, and his mother pretended to be his sister. There are people who have analyzed Ted in retrospect who think that whole situation fueled his sociopathic tendencies. And that's when he told me, and I think the only person he told was that the first person he killed was a young boy when they were playing some kind of sex game in the woods. And so he must have been only 12, 13, or 14. I didn't go into a lot of detail because I didn't need to or want to. Ted told me in that interview that he killed over 100 people. And then he told me he'd been active in the Northeast, Idaho, and for the first time, California. I think he was purging himself, and I think for a brief period of time, that small part of him that recognized that he was evil came out. That was the time when I felt most like I don't want to be here. I'm not sure I even want to be a defense lawyer. I remember holding the jail cell, not facing Ted, and I was going, you know, what the hell are you doing here? You know, why are you helping this disgusting person?
When Ted began confessing a lot of things, and John couldn't talk about what Ted confessed until Ted died because of the attorney-client privilege, which was it wasn't 36 dead girls, it was over 100, and the details of what he did to their bodies and did to them when they were alive. What a horrible burden, you know, to deal with someone like that. That's the worst of the worst, the most heinous of the heinous. And all of those details, John had to keep to himself. And I think that had to be torture.
And also it was in that conversation where he told me that he knew about the death of my girlfriend. The first time I'd heard that from Ted. So that obviously upset me greatly. There's no belief amongst the police authorities now that Ted had anything to do with Deborah's murder. But she did fit the profile of all the people that he was killing. It was almost beyond coincidence, but I believe, as I say, I have to believe that Ted had nothing to do with Deborah's death. I have to believe that, because I could never forgive myself if he did. But the fact that he knew about it and then chose me is very creepy. I don't know that it's explainable. At one point, I excused myself and went to the men's room and got sick to my stomach. And his emotional state went on for an hour or more, maybe 2, and then all of a sudden I said something like, "Why are you telling me all this?" And he just completely snapped back into his lawyer-like mode and got up, sat on the bunk, washed his face off. Everything was fine. And I find that very chilling and haunting.